All right, we should now be good to go. All right. Thanks so much to everyone who's tuning in tonight as we bring our established horde and beat writer crew back to break down the season that was for UConn men's basketball. So everyone, thanks so much for coming on again.
Yeah, it was great last time. Thanks.
Thank you, Jared.
Our pleasure.
So I know we've got a lot to talk about this season, a lot of exciting things, some interesting things to look at heading into the future. So I figured the best way to get started is just kind of if you guys will go around the horn here and just give initial thoughts on the season and how you thought this team performed this year. So Gavin, we'll start with you. You're top left, so you get first billing here.
All right. Well, I think it was a successful season. They got back to the tournament for the first time in 5 years, third place in the Big East. So I think in all levels it was successful there. And that's really, Coach Hurley said those were the goals coming into the season. You would like to see him win a game in the tournament, but I think overall it was just a successful season.
Neill, how about we'll go to you next?
Yeah, kind of a stepping stone. I think you maybe needed to have this kind of season before you can start having big dreams as a UConn fan. Elite Eights and titles and all that stuff. So you didn't necessarily have to lose in the first tournament, like Gavin said, but I think it was kind of a necessary stepping stone improvement type season. A big step, obviously, getting back to the postseason. Having probably a lottery pick, getting more notoriety. So yeah, definitely A-.
How about you, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, Dan Hurley has kind of mapped out his blueprint of these first 3 years, and he'll be the first to tell you that he's mapped it out almost perfectly so far. First year struggles, second year, quote unquote, excruciating losses. Ended up, towards the end of the year playing very well and turning those into victories, including ones on the road. And then this year, his stated goal was to finish among the top four in the Big East and make the NCAA tournament. He did both, and like Neill said, a potential lottery pick in James Bouknight. Program's definitely on the upswing. I think you have to consider the season an overall success, even though the way they were playing late in the year, you really had sort of it looked like they could make a real run in the NCAA tournament, and they wound up losing their final 2 games of the year.
Mm-hmm. Dom, anything on your end to add there?
Yeah, I would just add that, look, anybody involved with UConn, whether you're a fan or anyone else, would have signed 3 years ago in March 2018 for March 2021. I mean, they were 14 and 18. They had the talent had really been depleted. And for him to come in and, first year a little bit better, third year second year over 500. We don't know what kind of a run they might have made last year if the season wasn't shut down. Mm-hmm. Third year, they're in the NCAA tournament and back in the Big East. So I think anyone would have signed for the season that they had, even though it had a very disappointing end.
I think we could start in now on the news that was made today, obviously, with the departure of James Bouknight. And Dave, I know you were on top of this, really from when the season's end, pretty much, that James was going to leave. But it seemed like today there was possibly some hesitation. Do you think this was something from the start where he knew he was gone and that was that this year?
I think the plan all along, I mean, the stated plan from the get-go, I think was he was going to stay here for 2 years. And hopefully if he was ready to be drafted, certainly as a lottery pick, he'd leave after his sophomore year. I think that James, as he mentioned today, legitimately loved being here, wanted to kind of etch his name in UConn lore a little bit better than he did in terms of postseason and sort of big moments. But this was a no-brainer, as Dan Hurley said. To me, it was, people saying, the thing I find interesting is people say, people look at his last couple of games, he didn't play very well, and he's not ready. He's not physically ready, and he's not ready for the NBA. And to a certain degree, that's kind of true, but obviously he's got to get stronger and improve some things. But the bottom line is, as we all know, the NBA drafts on potential. He oozes with potential, and he could have been a first-round draft pick last year. Probably not, but he was smart not to take that chance. because if you draft in the second round, you don't get the guaranteed money and all that. But the potential was there, and scouts saw it last year, and they certainly saw it this year. He made the absolute right decision today.
We'll kick it around too. And anyone else with some initial thoughts on the book night departure?
Well, yeah, I think, it's funny because Pete, we go through this. I know Dave probably experiences the same thing, and you guys, we experience this year after year with these guys. Was Andre Drummond ready for the NBA? Or was Jeremy Lamb ready? I mean, those guys would have been better with one more year. You can't. It's irrelevant. I mean, of course, James Bouknight's not ready to play and be a star in the NBA, but that's not what he's being drafted for. It's drafting players with upside, and I get these emails from these old codgers. I saw Toby Kimball get 47 rebounds against New Hampshire. Don't tell me I know the NBA and he's not ready for the NBA. It's irrelevant. It's 2021. It's not the way business is done this year, and it hasn't been done that way for a long, long time. So, no, there was absolutely no question that he was going to go, and I think there wasn't any hesitation. There was maybe some introspection, some disappointment, some little tugging that you want to stay, but he knew that from a business standpoint, and Dan Hurley knew that too, absolutely no chance on earth that he would stay when everyone's telling him he's going to be a top 15 pick. Look at the money the top 15 guys signed for last year, and you tell me if there was any chance he was going to stay. There's just none.
Yeah, the world has changed. I mean, in the NBA world, all you guys have said about drafting potential. I mean, way back when Rip Hamilton was trying to decide, he come back another year and play another season, you'll be more ready for the NBA. But it's not about that anymore. It's about projecting what you can do. And on top of that, he's going to get into a professional setting where they'll, work with them. That will be his job. Nutrition, strength training, all that comes with it. And that's how staying at UConn another year, he wouldn't be getting that. And he's not going to see his stock anymore. Maybe
look at it,
not much.
Look at it this way. If he came back next year and he had a monster season and he led UConn to the championship, his stock could still go down because now he's a year older, which, they evaluate you differently at 21 and 20. And two, who's going to be in the draft next year? Maybe there's an influx of one and dones. Maybe there's an influx of players from Europe that knocks him down. So he could come back and have this monster year and still drop from where he's told he's going to be picked this year. That's the way it works. That's why.
And the injury had to play a part because he's thinking I could get hurt again next year, and then my stock could drop. So that.
I know one thing that I think surprised a lot of UConn fans down the stretch was the performance from James in those last two games of the year. I know there had been a lot of debate over, is he fully recovered? What were your thoughts on his level at that time? What was he in a position where he was at peak? I know we saw that terrible footage of him, being carried off with the cramps and all, but where do you think he was health-wise, down the stretch for this team?
Well, I think he was.
I don't think he wants to admit it, but he wasn't 100%.
Go ahead, Neil. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dave. Sorry. No big deal. No, I was just saying, I don't think he wants to admit 100%. I think he. Are you losing me? Is it a horrible connection?
Yeah.
Well, you're freezing up a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, I asked him about that today, and he said he wasn't making any excuses for his poor play. It wasn't about the elbow, which is the right thing to say. I just look at that 1 for 13 on 3-pointers the last couple of games, and I feel like his elbow must have been bothering him where he just couldn't shoot. Maybe couldn't do what he liked to do with his left arm. I mean, that's my feeling. I mean, it's I know I said this many times, but to come back from elbow surgery in a couple of weeks is not something that happens. So it's very possible that he was still hampered by a stiffness or not having full range of motion in that elbow.
Yeah, I think his stamina, certainly when he first came back, was an issue. I mean, he cramped up that first game he came back against Providence. And I think the whole thing maybe threw him off his rhythm a little bit in terms of not being able to practice a lot and certainly not play for those 6 weeks. So yeah, health wise, I mean, yeah, sure there were some issues and nobody wanted to really make it public, but I think really Donald, and let's not forget, I mean, teams just keyed on him too.
Mhm.
I mean, that's why I don't think the NBA, front offices and scouts really take too much into account the poor play of the last couple of games because, he's not going to get keyed on like that in the NBA, at least to start off his career. And he was just, defenses made it really tough on him. Now, could he have done a better job against him? Sure. But overall, I just think, I think he probably was maybe not 100%, but I think he was all right, more or less physically.
Hey, listen, against good teams, UConn struggled. They struggled all year, and he struggled too. And not having his teammates play well in those games too, to take the heat off of him a little bit, didn't help. So it's really a combination of reasons why he had such a tough time in the last couple of games, because he was expected to carry him, and the opponents just said, we're not going to let you take over the game.
I think we could jump into some of those other guys now, and we could just start with this one. I know we had a good chunk of games without James Bouknight, obviously probably the MVP of the team this year, but if you had to pick another guy outside of Bouknight that impressed you the most this year, who would it be? And Gavin, we'll start with you and work our way around again.
Well, that's an easy one. Sanogo. I mean, he came in and the first, 10 games or so, Hurley would say he's lost out there. He'd throw him out. He'd get in foul trouble. He'd make a couple of nice shots, but he'd be lost on defense. And then look what he was doing at the end of the year. He had all these great moves into the basket. He got in some foul trouble, but not as much as he did in the beginning of the season. I mean, that's of it all. He's going to be an all Big East level player. I mean, he had an incredible second half of the year. And I know the coaching staff saw his talent, but I'm not even sure they thought he was going to be this good this soon, especially with not having the summer and the normal preseason to get ready for your first year playing at a high level.
All right, Neill, we'll give you another shot here.
We'll see if the connection holds up. No, I'd take RJ Cole in that situation. I think despite the Creighton, despite the struggle to make layups and that, he was an excellent scorer, an excellent distributor. I mean, it's hard to ask him as he did at Howard, but I think without him, they're low night. And when he was out, they were good, not great, had some struggles, but I think that he can play at this level, which there was, I guess, a small question of before this.
All right, Dave, who do you got here?
Well, those are the two guys, right? RJ or Adama. I mean, Tyrese Martin certainly had his moments this year. At times, he was kind of for a while, I believe he's the second leading scorer on the team and really did a lot of nice things athletically, really a pretty good rebounder the entire year, but he kind of dipped down towards the end of the year. I would say, as far as this season goes, the non-Bouknight MVP was probably RJ Cole. I thought he could have made honorable mention, all Big East. Played really well played well without Bouknight and played well when he came back, and the two became a real formidable combo. As far as future goes, the guy with the best future of the guys we've mentioned anyway, no question, Adama Sanogo, and I think he can really be a dominant, really even a dominant player next year as a sophomore.
Yeah, I think Adama certainly exceeded expectations more than any player on the team, right? I mean, as a freshman, he wasn't really even expected to start, and he took the job away from Josh Carlton and really had a productive year. A lot of great games, and in fact, he had his best games in big spots against good teams. But I think in the case of RJ Cole, the expectations for him were very, very high coming into the season, and you might argue that he came up a little short of that very, very high bar. But I thought he had a really good year. I thought, not only did he have a lot of assists, but a great assist to turnover ratio, better than 2 to 1. I thought his shooting he shot the ball pretty well down the stretch. It's not the last game or two. And he was a great floor general. And you saw what happened the last 4 minutes against Creighton when he wasn't out there. So
Right.
I feel like Cole would be that guy, but certainly Sonogo had the best year in terms of exceeding expectations.
Let's talk about a couple of the seniors here, because I know their status is still up in the air. So if you have any insight into that as well, but Tyler Polley, Isaiah Whaley, we know Josh Carlton is going to be using that transfer year in heading out. What were your thoughts on the performance of the seniors this year? And then can you see any of them coming back? Dom, we could start with you on that one.
Yeah, well, I thought UConn probably needed to get a little bit more out of the seniors this year. I thought when they did put Carlton in the game that they needed more from him. And Polley, he's got the prettiest looking 3-point shot there is, but, not enough of them went in this year. You're going to have a 3-point specialist, he needs to be up around 40%, which he was, earlier in his career. But obviously Whaley, I thought, gave him what they needed. He had a really, really good year. And I would guess that if you're Dan Hurley and you could get your starting center back or your starting 4 back for another year, you'd be crazy not to want to do that. Why not? So I think he might be the most likely to come back. Tyler is one of those guys that just loves UConn, and I think he's happy at whatever role he gets. So he might, I could see either of those guys coming back or both of them, coming back. Normally, Whaley might have either one might have an opportunity to go make some money overseas, and they might want to take their degree and move on. But those opportunities may not be there this year because of COVID. So I think it's possible you could see both of them back. I don't know if I would say probable that you'll see both of them back, but I think it's certainly possible.
How about you, Dave?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Whaley is the guy who would probably be, would get the most playing time if he did come back, probably be the one they'd want back the most. The flip side, of course, being he's also probably the guy hit with the best chance of making some money somewhere, whether it's overseas or possibly in the G League. So there's that sort of conundrum. And with Polley, I'm sure there's a way for him to make money playing basketball somewhere. I mean, there's a million leagues all over the world. With a guy who can shoot like that, I'm sure he'd find a spot. But I think it'd be an easier path for Isaiah. Would Tyler Polley be welcome, be accepting of coming back and knowing that he's kind of just going to be a sort of a reserve off the bench to come in and hit threes and try to give him some energy off the bench and maybe only play 10, 12, 15 minutes a game? Is that worth coming back for another season? It might be, because as Dom said, I talked to Tyler's mother about a month ago, and she, he just absolutely loves everything about it. He'd stay forever if he could. So it's kind of like, on the one hand, one guy could help more, but he could also might have a better opportunity playing elsewhere. The guy, and then with Polley, let's not forget too. Let's give some props to Brendan Adams, who obviously a junior who's graduating early, and he just announced today on Wednesday that he's going to be playing at George Washington University. A very good career for him too here. Not as great as he probably wanted it to be, but really helped out the team over the last 3 years.
Neill, any thoughts on the someone of the two or both coming back?
Agree with Dom and David. Much more likely than Polley, and for all the reasons described. Polley for that stretch, and then really struggled to shoot down the stretch a little bit, and it was him. But I wouldn't buy one more try. It's such a unique situation with the granting the extra years, and like I was saying, if they're going to let him have 17 scholarships, he'll take them.
Gavin, anything else extra that has been mentioned on those two?
I just think it's kind of important if they could get Whaley back, because you don't know a Cook situation, and you don't want them just surrounding Adama next year in the low post. So I think it's important that they could get Whaley back. It really just comes down to what does he want. And as far as Tyler goes, once again, if he's happy with his role, 20 minutes, 21 minutes a game off the bench, and being the scorer off the bench, then you take him too, because offensively losing Book Night, the points have to come somewhere. You can't rely on the new kids coming in to do a lot offensively right off. So Whaley's got the best chance of coming back, and they could use Pauly, but it depends what he wants.
One thing you mentioned there, and I think has been a mystery all season for UConn fans, has been the situation around a Cook. What have you guys heard in terms of his availability heading into the offseason and where they hope to get him heading into next year?
You want me to start?
Yeah, you can start, Dom.
Yeah, this mystery just drives me crazy, up the wall, because the coach was asked about this a dozen times, and he answered it the same way a dozen times, that he's not quite ready. He's not going to be at full strength until 18 months out of surgery, which would be July. And he just was, they put him out there against St. John's. He really got blown by a lot. I think his plus minus in that game was 7, and it kind of turned that game around. And they were just not going to play him again. When he looked good and he felt good, they wanted to try to get him out there to do a couple of things he could do, pop a 3-pointer in that one game and score a little bit in that Xavier game, and it gave him a little spark. But I don't know. To me, I thought Dan, made it very clear again and again and again that there's no mystery here. He's just not ready to play. Now, whether he's ever going to be back to what he was is a question, because everyone heals from those Achilles differently. But I thought it was made pretty clear many times that he just was not going to be ready to be the old Cook this year, that's going to have to wait till next year.
Anyone else here?
Well, I know fans kept asking about him, but if Coach Hurley thought he was ready or physically ready to contribute, he would have played. I mean, that's what it really comes down to. There was all right to the end of the season. How come they don't put a Cook in? Well, he wasn't ready. He's not physically ready to contribute. So he just needs more time to recover. And as Dom says, who knows what his future is? We'll just have to wait and see.
The only thing that made it a little bit strange situation was the fact that
him something.
Go ahead, Neill.
No.
All right, Dave.
Sorry, connection is terrible, but and he did.
All right, Neill, we are losing you a bit. All right, Dave, we'll let you jump in here.
I was just going to say, the only thing that made it a little bit strange is, and the reason why I think Dan was asked about it a few times and started to get irritated by being asked about it after a while, was because Cook was, dressed for every game once he came back, played a few times, we participated in warm-ups and everything. It wasn't like he was a guy who was obviously not going to play, but dressed in civilian clothes or so that just made it a little bit of a strange situation. That's why on my timeline in every game in February and March was filled with put a Cook in. Why isn't a Cook in the game? And yes, Dan did make it very clear as to why. But I think just the fact that it seemed like, he sort of looked available, for lack of a better term, was why people kind of questioned the whole thing.
See, what I was told about that was that he worked so hard on the rehab, and he really crushed the rehab. And they wanted to keep him encouraged, keep him motivated. They didn't want to tell him, you're not going to play. So they didn't want to put him out there and risk anything, but they also wanted to keep him working hard and positive and keep his spirits up. So that's the reason why they tried to make him feel as much a part of the team as they could, warm-ups and et cetera. I thought it was a little bit strange that everybody, including, Andrew Hurley, played against DePaul in the first game in the Garden, and Cook didn't even get into that game. That was a little bit strange. But, for the most part, they didn't want him to get discouraged, but they also didn't want to, throw him out there when he just wasn't ready.
As we're looking towards next year's team and some of the needs that they have, what do you see as the biggest need for this team heading into next season? And is it something that Is it? We'll send Neill some money to help his connection there. Is it something that they have coming in with incoming recruits, or is this something? I know Dan Hurley said they don't want to become transfer U. Is this something though where maybe there's an opportunistic transfer pickup in there like they did last year with Tyrese Martin? Gavin, you could start with that one.
Yeah, they have to find a transfer to fill an offensive need. Somebody who can create their own shot and score. They outside of Bouknight, there are not a lot of guys on that team that can create their own shot. So, you got a couple freshman guards coming in and a forward. So, they're good players. Hawkins and Diggins are both good players. But you can't count on freshmen to carry you offensively. So they really need somebody who's a proven scorer. Especially if Tyler doesn't come back, there's another offensive loss. So I think that the transfer would definitely help him out in that situation.
Dave, we'll go to you.
Yeah, I agree. I think Dan Hurley has said the other day that they're looking for guys who are a little more skilled and guys who can shoot. So that's kind of what they're looking for, and that's kind of what you look for, in my opinion, on the transfer market, more so than maybe an incoming freshman who, it's tough for freshmen to contribute right off the bat. Not that they can, and they have, but I think you get a veteran guy who can come in, provide some, stretch things out a little bit, especially as Gavin said, if Tyler Polley decides to leave, then you're kind of there goes probably your best 3-point shooter. So that's a need that they're gonna and if you look at some of the guys who they've contacted, and they've contacted quite a few, a lot of those guys are shooters. So I think that's without question a need that they're gonna look to fill probably through the transfer portal.
Yeah, they've got to get guys who could put the ball in the basket, and that's literally the name of the game. Guys who could score. They have enough grinders. They've had enough guys who can grind. Sonogo actually has a nice touch around the basket, and he finishes a little bit. But they've got to get some guys who could shoot better. I know they thought Adams would be the answer, would be a good shooter. They obviously love the way Polley shoots, but they've got to get guys who could shoot. And Hawkins might be a guy, and Diggins. Those guys are obviously had that kind of prowess in high school. I don't care where you get them. It could be a freshman. It could be a fifth-year transfer. I don't care. But if they're going to be better, they've got to get a couple of guys that could score. And maybe you have to sacrifice somewhere else to get those guys on the court. But they've got to get some guys who could score, because that's clearly what they were missing in the games that they lost.
Yeah, that's a question. Whether is he going to sacrifice some defense to put an offensive guy out there that they're going to need, and that's hard for him to do.
One thing I know that's been mentioned, since Coach Hurley's been here is the 3-year schedule and, what you want to see in year 1, year 2, year 3. So we've gotten through year 3. As we're looking into the next few years, what does that plan look like for this team in continuing the rebuild of what he's trying to do here?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think it's a fascinating question, Jared, because he's never been past this point before. He took, obviously, Wagner 2 years. He did what he could do there. Rhode Island, he took about as far as he could go. But he's never taken a team, he's taken teams from the bottom and made them good again, or good. He's never taken a team from this point all the way to the top. And keep in mind, anybody who knows the history knows, think about how many years and how many disappointments there were between the dream season and the first championship. You got to understand that these things don't necessarily happen all the time. But so I think what the next 3 or 4 years are going to look like, the big thing is going to be not to have a slide backwards. They've got to make the tournament every year. They've got to be an automatic tournament team like they were. And then you're going to have years when you make runs. You're going to have years when you don't. But it's going to be interesting to see, Hurley really in uncharted territory for him, and that's now trying to take that next step. He hasn't done that yet in his career, and I know that's what he wants to do in his career.
Yeah, he said that he literally used the words he loves to rebuild. He really enjoys it. It's fun it's enjoyable for him. But like Dom said, it's now it's can you maintain it? At URI, he did take them from basically the bottom of the A10 and took them. Year 4 was kind of side railed by injury to their best player,
right.
EC Matthews. But in years 5 and 6, obviously, he got him back to the tournament. They hadn't been there in 20 years, and he got him there in consecutive years and won a game each time. So to that point, he did kind of maintain it for a couple of years, but he's obviously looking more long range here at UConn. So yeah, I look at it like you see these baseball GMs and Theo Epstein saying how much he loves the thrill of building a team and a program, so to speak. Then when they get to the top, he doesn't know what to do and he leaves. And so it'll be interesting to see how Dan handles prosperity, if he can maintain it and if he can continue on it for many years.
Yeah, I knew you were going there, Dave. I know you knew you were going the Heim Bloom route.
Getting back, I mean, they're not going to. The next jump isn't to go to a national championship game. Or we're going to find out. For the next jump is consistency, like these guys have said. Return to the tournament every year. Keep building the talent base. That's the next jump. It's going to take time before they can compete on a national championship level. And I know the fans are really excited about what's going on. And they should be, but the next step is even one of the hardest ones to make. To go from a very good program to a great program, and so they got to get the consistency first before they can make that next jump to a great program.
Neill, we'll give you a shot here. It looks like you might have gotten unfrozen on us. So
it won't last. Don't enjoy it too much. I was just going to crack that year undefeated national championship season. So I have to wait just a couple there. I agree with him. I mean, Dan's never been in this situation. It's uncharted territory. He established himself as one of the best, rebuilders and builders, and it remains to be seen what happens, as he tries to maintain and grow further and get over a really, really big hill, which is, Elite Eights and Final Fours and titles.
We could start to wrap things up a bit here. I just got a couple more questions, and this is just, I guess, kind of behind the scenes look here. But I'm curious, while I've got you guys all, what was this like? What was this year like covering the team, given how different things were, not being in person, at road games, doing a lot of stuff virtually? What was it like from a beat writer's experience?
You felt disconnected from it.
I had no technological problems at all.
Yeah, the wireless in Gamble worked fine. that was the plus side, but you felt disconnected not having the one-on-one interaction. The times of practice where you could just hang around and talk to Coach Early for a while, BS with the players a little bit, get to know them. I mean, we were obviously grateful to have the Zoom opportunities, but it just felt so disconnected.
Yeah, you don't get to know the kids as well. You don't get, and then there's this little things like when we're gathered around Dan Hurley after a practice, we kind of pepper him with questions for 8-10 minutes or so, whatever it is. Then when things start breaking up a little bit, you can kind of get him again off to the side, and maybe he'll give you little tidbits, not just one person, maybe a few other people, things like that. If you annoy Dan Hurley with something, you can kind of straighten out with him face to face after a practice. We didn't have those things this year. It was just tough. Little things, getting to know the players better. Again, getting a player sort of one-on-one after a game. Maybe you have a question you want to ask him that you didn't, no one else asked, and you kind of just wanted to get in by yourself. You could do that sometimes in a normal season. Just couldn't do that this year. So it was really tough. I'll tell you, I'm not trying to look for sympathy or anything, but it was tough for all of us. But if I don't ever have to do another Zoom press conference, I'll be a happy man.
Yeah, it's just not the way to do sports. Now, I must say this: a year ago, I'm sure a lot of us, including me, were scared to death that sports would be going all together and we wouldn't even have a season. And obviously, our jobs depend on that. So I'm very glad that we had a season and we had to deal with what we had to deal with. Okay, those are, in the big picture, those are small problems to have. But, I do hope, not only for us or college basketball, but other sports too, like baseball, which of course I have a lot of experience with, as Dave does, and the NFL. Not having that interaction, that ability to talk to people one-on-one, to work a clubhouse and talk to different people and not just have this. I mean, I was so desperate to just do something that wasn't the same thing everyone else was doing. I walked 3 steps down to talk to R.J. Cole's mother at Gamble Pavilion. I was nearly dragged out in handcuffs. But it's, as an old school sports writer, it's a real tough way to cover sports. I'm grateful that we had some sports to cover and some way to do it. But hopefully when things get back to normal, this type of access won't become the norm. I fear that it will.
And the other thing
I'm hoping we get back to normal.
The other thing we all sorely missed is the fans. I mean, there are some games here at Gamble that are great games, and you're like, boy, could you imagine what the fans would be like right now, during this game? And that was so sorely missed. The atmosphere was just, we're up in the crow's nest there, and it just really, it said you're so far removed, and there's no fans. It was. I mean, I really look forward to the first home game with the full house in Gamble.
Yeah.
And I know fans are looking forward to the same thing and getting things back to normal next year. You got to wait a little longer to get to some of those nicer destinations now. But I always like to end these, kind of looking forward again into next year. If you had to give like a wild off-season hot take or prediction about this team heading into next year, what would it be? And Dom, I know we usually end with you, so you could start this one.
You want me to start this one? All right. Wow, wild hot take. I'm gonna say that Andre Jackson is gonna go from where he is now to maybe being a better player than Book Knight was this year by this time next year. I think he's really a phenomenal athlete, phenomenal player, a charismatic player. And he just didn't get the chance to show it this year because of the 2 injuries that he had, the lack of practice time, the inability to maybe play some games against mid-majors and kind of get, build up to it. But I know people might be looking at him and thinking, what was the big deal here? I don't see it. But I think you're going to see it next year. I think he's going to be the it player next year that you saw only very few flashes of this year.
Dave.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I'm going to say, all right, this one's out of nowhere. I'm going to say Richie Springs is going to be a contributor next year. And the reason I say that is because, for one, Dan Hurley, he could transfer tomorrow and I'll look like an idiot. But I think he's had, 2 straight years barely playing. He's played, I think, a grand total of 13 minutes. Obviously, the first year he was an academic redshirt, but it's a lot of time just sitting on the bench watching games. They said that they saw some things they liked about him the second half of the season. And let's be honest, Dan wasn't, Dan didn't really scope out Isaiah Whaley at first. He had him kind of buried on the bench for a while until out of necessity with the Cooks injury and things like that. Isaiah, towards the end of midway through last season or 2 seasons ago, started to get playing time, started to be very productive. So maybe Richie's been overlooked a little bit. But I think if nothing else, if he does decide to stay with the program, and I've nothing to believe that he wouldn't, he's got to be anxious and ready to get out there and contribute in some way.
I like that take, Dave. I mean, if there isn't a plan to play him and hope of playing him, then he probably shouldn't be here now. Why is he here? So, yeah, I like that plan.
I'll check the portal real quick, though. Make sure he's not there.
Well, it's another thing, too, about Whaley coming back or the seniors coming back. You do want to develop some of this younger talent. That's what it's there for.
Neill, we'll see if we could get you in here for fun.
Andrew Hurley's shooting percentage will remain 100. That's my big prediction.
I like it. All right, Gavin, we'll close out with you here.
I'm going to say RJ Cole is going to take another big jump, and it's going to be kind of his team. Even though Andre Jackson might do what you guys are saying and kind of become the new star, but I think RJ, without having to defer to Booknight a little bit, and he really emerged the second half of the season. So I think, and he's been kind of developed into a pretty good team leader. So I think RJ Cole is going to be even a bigger factor next year.
Awesome. Well, guys, I really appreciate the time. Thanks for hopping on. Thanks for all your coverage this year and keeping us up to date on everything while we were far away from Gamble. And hopefully next year we're back in there, can jeer you from the seats a little bit and get you guys back to how the way things used to be. So thanks so much. And we'll have to reconvene again come October as we get closer to the start of the season. So thanks again, everyone. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, it's fun, Jared. Thanks a lot for having us.
You got it,
Absolutely.
Jared. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Jared.
Thanks, guys.
You do a good job. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.